The storm had passed, leaving behind a trail of destruction that would change everything. Sarah Mitchell stepped onto her front porch, surveying the damage to her small farmhouse property. Fallen branches scattered the yard like broken bones, and the old oak tree that had stood sentinel for decades now lay across her driveway. But it wasn't the tree that made her blood run cold. Pinned beneath its massive trunk was a man in black leather, his Hells Angels jacket torn and bloodied. His motorcycle lay twisted beside him like a wounded animal. Sarah's instincts screamed danger. Everything about him radiated trouble. Yet as she approached, she saw something that stopped her in her tracks. His eyes, barely conscious but filled with a desperate plea for help. In that moment, Sarah faced a choice that would test her faith, her courage, and everything she believed about redemption. But would saving this stranger cost her everything she held dear? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she knelt beside the stranger. The Hells Angels patch on his torn leather jacket seemed to mock her from where she crouched in the mud. Everything her father had taught her about helping others warred with every instinct that screamed this man was dangerous. The biker's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glazed with pain. Blood seeped from a gash across his forehead, and his left leg was twisted at an unnatural angle beneath the massive oak trunk. Sarah could see the bone pressing against the fabric of his jeans. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the dripping of rainwater from the eaves. "Please." That single word, spoken with such desperate vulnerability, cracked something open inside her chest. Sarah had heard that same plea in her father's stories from Vietnam, when wounded soldiers begged medics for help, regardless of which side they fought for. She reached for the medical kit her father had left her, the same one he'd carried as an army medic decades ago. The leather case was worn smooth from years of use, its brass clasps tarnished, but still functional. Inside, surgical tape, gauze, and antiseptic waited alongside instruments that had saved lives in jungles half a world away. "What's your name?" Sarah asked, checking his pulse. It was weak but steady. "Marcus," he managed, trying to focus on her face. "Marcus Torres. I'm Sarah Mitchell. Can you tell me where it hurts the most?" Marcus attempted a bitter laugh that turned into a cough. "Where doesn't it hurt would be easier." Sarah examined the tree trunk pinning his legs. The oak had to weigh several tons, far more than she could move alone. She'd need help, but the storm had knocked out phone lines throughout the county. Her nearest neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, was 3 miles away and well into her 70s. "I'm going to try to get this weight off you," Sarah said, standing and surveying the situation. "My tractor's in the barn. If I can get a chain around this trunk." Marcus grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "Don't leave me here, please." The raw fear in his voice surprised her. This man, covered in tattoos and leather, was terrified of being abandoned. Sarah knelt back down, placing her hand over his. "I'm not going anywhere, I promise. But I need to get equipment to free you." "The bike," Marcus whispered, his eyes drifting to the twisted motorcycle. "Keys are in my pocket, left side." "There's something there I need." Sarah hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket. Her fingers found a set of keys attached to a metal insignia, reading "Road Captain" in Gothic script. But there was something else, something that made her pause. A small, worn photograph. Before she could look at it, Marcus's hand closed over hers. "That's private." "Of course." Sarah pulled her hand back, respecting his boundary. "I'll be right back with the tractor." "Stay with me, Marcus. Don't you dare give up." As she hurried toward the barn, Sarah's mind raced. She was harboring a member of one of the most notorious motorcycle clubs in the country. Her neighbors would be horrified. The sheriff would demand explanations. But looking into Marcus's eyes, she'd seen something that transcended the leather and tattoos. She'd seen a human being in desperate need of help. The tractor started on the second try, its diesel engine coughing to life in the humid air. Sarah had learned to operate farm equipment out of necessity after her husband died, though she'd never imagined using it for a rescue operation. Back at the tree, she carefully positioned the tractor and looped a heavy chain around the trunk. Marcus watched her work, his breathing shallow but determined. "You know what you're doing," he observed. "My father always said a person should know how to handle whatever life throws at them." Sarah tested the chain's security. "He was a medic in Vietnam. Taught me that everyone deserves help regardless of who they are or what they've done. Smart man. He was." Sarah climbed back onto the tractor. "This might hurt when the pressure releases. Are you ready?" Marcus nodded, gripping the muddy ground with both hands. The tractor strained against the weight, its wheels spinning briefly in the wet earth before finding purchase. Slowly, incredibly, the massive trunk began to shift. Marcus cried out as the pressure released from his legs, but Sarah could see relief flood his features. "That's it," she called over the engine noise. "You're free." As the tree rolled away, Marcus struggled to sit up. His left leg was clearly broken, but he was alive and conscious. Sarah cut the engine and rushed to his side. "Easy now. Let's get you inside, where I can properly tend to those injuries." Supporting most of his weight, Sarah helped Marcus limp toward her farmhouse. With each step, she felt as though she was crossing some invisible line, moving from the safety of her solitary life into something far more complex and dangerous. Sarah's kitchen had never felt smaller than it did with Marcus Torres sprawled across her. Grandfather's old wooden table. She'd cleared away the morning's breakfast dishes to make room for this impromptu medical station, spreading clean towels beneath him to protect the scarred oak surface. Marcus's breathing came in short, controlled bursts as Sarah cut away the torn denim around his injured leg. The break was clean, thank goodness, but it would need proper medical attention soon. His motorcycle keys lay on the counter where she'd placed them. The road captain insignia catching the afternoon light streaming through her lace curtains. "You should call for help," Marcus said through gritted teeth as Sarah cleaned the wound on his forehead. "I can see you thinking about it. Already tried." "Phone lines are down from the storm." Sarah dabbed antiseptic on the cut, noting how he barely flinched. "Storm knocked out most of the county's communications." "Probably for the best," Marcus muttered, then seemed to catch himself. "I mean, for your sake. You don't want to be mixed up with someone like me." Sarah paused in her ministrations. "Someone like you? Come on, lady. You've got eyes. You can see what I am. I can see you're hurt and far from home." Sarah continued cleaning his wounds with practiced efficiency. "Beyond that, I don't make assumptions." Marcus studied her face, searching for something. "Most people take one look at this jacket and cross the street. Most people haven't spent their childhood listening to their father's stories about battlefield medicine. He always said wounded was wounded, no matter what uniform someone wore. As if summoned by her mention of help, the sound of an approaching vehicle made them both freeze. Sarah peered through the kitchen window to see her neighbor's ancient pickup truck navigating around the fallen branches in her driveway. "Mrs. Henderson," Sarah whispered. "She must have seen the tree fall." "Hide me," Marcus said urgently, trying to sit up despite his injuries. "Please, if she sees me here, lie still. You'll make that leg worse." Sarah placed a firm hand on his chest. "I'll handle this." The elderly woman's knock echoed through the house with characteristic determination. Sarah smoothed her hair and opened the front door, stepping onto the porch and pulling the door nearly closed behind her. "Sarah, dear, are you all right?" Mrs. Henderson's sharp eyes took in Sarah's mud-stained clothes and the debris scattered across the yard. "I saw that old oak come down during the storm. Such a shame. Your grandfather planted that tree." "I'm fine, Mrs. Henderson, just cleaning up the mess. You shouldn't be doing that alone." "Where's your chainsaw?" "I'll have my grandson come over this evening with his truck." Sarah's mind raced. "That's very kind, but I can manage." "The county road crew said they'd be by tomorrow to clear the larger pieces." Mrs. Henderson's weathered face creased with concern. "Something's not right here, Sarah. You're acting peculiar." "And what's that motorcycle doing in your yard?" Sarah's heart sank. She'd forgotten about Marcus's bike, still visible where it had been thrown by the impact. Some poor fellow got caught in the storm. His bike skidded off the road when the tree came down. Where is he now? Is he hurt? Before Sarah could answer, a low groan escaped from inside the house. Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows shot up toward her grey hairline. "Sarah Mitchell, do you have a strange man in your house?" The direct question hung in the air between them. Sarah had never been good at outright lies, especially not to someone who'd known her since childhood. Mrs. Henderson had been her mother's closest friend, had helped raise Sarah after her parents died. "He's injured, Mrs. Henderson, badly injured. I couldn't just leave him." "Have you lost your mind? You don't know this person from Adam. He could be anyone. Could be dangerous." Another sound from inside made Mrs. Henderson push past Sarah toward the door. "I'm calling Sheriff Collins right now. Please don't." Sarah caught the older woman's arm. "At least, let me explain." Mrs. Henderson's expression softened slightly at the genuine distress in Sarah's voice. "Explain what, dear?" "Why you're harboring some stranger instead of getting proper help. Because sometimes proper help isn't what someone needs most." From inside the house came the distinct sound of something heavy hitting the floor, followed by a string of creative profanity that made both women wince. "That settles it," Mrs. Henderson said firmly. "I'm going in there to see what sort of ruffian you've taken in." Before Sarah could stop her, the elderly woman pushed through the front door and marched toward the kitchen. Sarah hurried after her, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything in their small, quiet community. Mrs. Henderson stopped dead in the kitchen doorway, her hand flying to her chest as she took in the sight of Marcus Torres sprawled across Sarah's table. The Hells Angels patch on his jacket seemed to fill the entire room with its presence. "Sweet Jesus," the elderly woman whispered. "Sarah, what have you done?" Marcus had managed to prop himself up on his elbows, his dark eyes moving between the two women with the wariness of a cornered animal. Blood had seeped through the makeshift bandage on his forehead, and his face was pale with pain and exhaustion. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice respectful despite the circumstances. "I don't want any trouble." "Trouble?" Mrs. Henderson's voice rose an octave. "You're a Hell's Angel, sitting in my dear friend's kitchen, and you don't want trouble." Sarah moved between them, her hands raised in a calming gesture. "Mrs. Henderson, please. He's hurt. He needs help. What he needs is to be in jail where he belongs." Mrs. Henderson fumbled in her purse for her cell phone. "These people are criminals, Sarah. Murderers and drug dealers." "I'm not," Marcus said firmly, then winced as he tried to sit up straighter. "I mean, I'm not what you think I am." Mrs. Henderson snorted. "That jacket says otherwise." Marcus looked down at the leather vest, his expression growing complicated. Slowly, painfully, he reached into his inner pocket and withdrew a worn leather wallet. His hands shook slightly as he opened it and removed a small photograph. "This is what I am," he said, holding up the picture. Sarah leaned closer and felt her breath catch. The photograph showed Marcus, younger and clean-shaven, kneeling beside a little girl who couldn't have been more than 6. She had his dark eyes and was grinning toothlessly at the camera, her small hand resting on his shoulder. Both of them wore matching T-shirts that read "World's Best Dad" and "Daddy's Girl." Her name was Emma, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She died 3 years ago. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light while she was walking home from school." The kitchen fell silent except for the steady drip of the leaky faucet. Sarah kept meaning to fix. Mrs. Henderson's phone remained forgotten in her hand as she stared at the photograph. "I joined the club after," Marcus continued, his eyes fixed on his daughter's face. "Figured I had nothing left to lose. But I never hurt anybody who didn't deserve it. Never sold drugs to kids. The club, they have rules about that stuff." Sarah found herself reaching for the photograph, studying the joy on both faces. "She's beautiful." She was everything. Marcus carefully took the picture back, holding it like something precious and fragile. "Smart as a whip. Wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. Said she was going to fix all the hurt animals in the world." Mrs. Henderson lowered her phone, her stern expression softening despite herself. "How old was she?" 7. Would have been 10 next month. Marcus tucked the photograph back into his wallet with infinite care. "I was supposed to pick her up that day. Had a club meeting instead. If I'd been there." "Don't," Sarah said firmly. "Don't do that to yourself. You can't change what happened." Marcus looked at her with surprise, as if he'd forgotten she was there. "How would you know?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her fingers unconsciously twisting the wedding ring she no longer wore, but kept in her jewelry box upstairs. "Because I've been carrying my own what-ifs for 5 years now. They'll eat you alive if you let them." Mrs. Henderson was studying both of them with the shrewd awareness that came from 8 decades of reading people. "Sarah, can I speak with you privately for a moment?" They stepped into the living room, leaving Marcus alone with his memories and his pain. Mrs. Henderson closed the door softly behind them. "That man is dangerous, Sarah. Not because he's evil, but because he's broken. Broken people do unpredictable things. So do lonely people," Sarah replied. "So do people who've given up hope. Is that what you're doing? Giving him hope?" Sarah looked back toward the kitchen door. "Maybe I'm giving it to myself too." Mrs. Henderson sighed deeply, suddenly looking every one of her 78 years. "Your mother would have done the same thing, you know. She never could turn away from a soul in need, no matter how much trouble it might cause. Will you call the sheriff?" The older woman was quiet for a long time, weighing duty against compassion. "Not today," she finally said. "But Sarah, if this goes badly, if he hurts you or brings trouble to this community, it'll be on my conscience too. I understand. I hope you do, dear. I truly hope you do." By morning, news of the mysterious biker had spread through the town like wildfire. Sarah discovered this when she stepped onto her porch to retrieve the newspaper and found 3 pickup trucks parked along the road, their occupants making no effort to hide their surveillance of her property. The headline of the local paper made her stomach drop. "Hell's Angels linked to drug trade. Federal investigation ongoing." Below it, a grainy photograph showed members of what appeared to be Marcus's chapter outside a courthouse. Their faces grim and unrepentant. "Wonderful," Sarah muttered, folding the paper and heading back inside. Marcus was sitting at her kitchen table, his injured leg propped up on a chair. He'd managed to shower and shave with her help, and wearing one of her late husband's shirts, he looked less intimidating than he had the day before. But the newspaper clipping she placed in front of him brought back the hard edges to his face. "When was this taken?" Sarah asked. 6 months ago. Federal grand jury. They're trying to prove we're a criminal organization instead of just a motorcycle club." Marcus pushed the paper away. "Most of it's garbage, but it makes good headlines." The sound of vehicles pulling into her driveway interrupted their conversation. Through the window, Sarah watched Sheriff Collins emerge from his patrol car, followed by 2 men in suits who had federal agent written all over them. "You need to hide," Sarah said urgently. "No." Marcus struggled to his feet, wincing at the pain in his leg. "Running will only make things worse. Besides, they already know I'm here." Sheriff Collins knocked with the authority of someone who expected immediate compliance. Sarah opened the door to find the 3 men arranged in a formation that suggested this wasn't a social call. "Morning, Sarah." Sheriff Collins touched the brim of his hat. "I understand you've got a guest. I have someone who was injured in yesterday's storm, yes. Mind if we come in? These gentlemen would like a word with him." The taller of the 2 agents stepped forward. "Agent Morrison, FBI. We're investigating activities related to the Serpent's Cross Motorcycle Club. We have reason to believe Marcus Torres is on your property." "He's hurt, Agent Morrison. Badly hurt. He needs medical attention, not interrogation." "Ma'am, Mr. Torres is a person of interest in a federal investigation. We need to speak with him." Sarah felt trapped between the law and her conscience. "He's not going anywhere. His leg is broken, Sarah." Marcus's voice came from behind her. "Let them in." She turned to see him leaning heavily on the doorframe, his face set with resignation. The agent's hands moved instinctively toward their weapons before they saw his obvious injuries. "Marcus Torres?" Agent Morrison asked. "That's me. You're under arrest for conspiracy to distribute controlled substances and racketeering." "Now wait just a minute," Sarah interrupted. "This man was nearly killed yesterday. He needs a doctor, not a jail cell." Agent Morrison's expression softened slightly. "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but Mr. Torres is wanted in connection with serious federal crimes." "What crimes specifically?" Sarah demanded. "What has he actually done?" The second agent consulted a file folder. Association with known criminals, presence at locations where illegal activities occurred, failure to cooperate with federal investigators. "That's not a crime," Sarah said hotly. "That's guilt by association." Sheriff Collins looked uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. "Sarah, I know you mean well, But harboring a fugitive is a serious offense. He's not a fugitive. He's an injured man who needed help. Marcus placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. It's all right. I knew this would happen eventually. He looked directly at Agent Morrison. I want to talk to you, but not here. This lady doesn't deserve to be dragged into this mess. We can do this at the sheriff's station. Morrison agreed. No, Marcus said firmly. I want to make a deal. I have information you want, but I want guarantees. Protection for people who matter. The agents exchanged glances. What kind of information? Marcus looked at Sarah, then back at the agents. The kind that could shut down operations you've been chasing for years. But I want to talk to someone with real authority. Someone who can make promises and keep them. Agent Morrison stepped closer. Mr. Torres, are you saying you're willing to cooperate with our investigation? I'm saying I'm tired of watching good people get hurt because of bad choices. Mine and others. Marcus's eyes found Sarah's again. Some things are worth the risk. Sheriff Collins cleared his throat. If we're doing this, we need to do it properly. Medical attention first, then we talk. As the group prepared to leave, Sarah caught Marcus's arm. What are you doing? What I should have done a long time ago, he said quietly. Thank you, Sarah, for everything. The convoy of official vehicles disappeared down her driveway, leaving Sarah alone with the newspaper clipping and the growing certainty that Marcus Torres was about to change more lives than just her own. Sarah spent the next 3 days in a strange limbo, fielding phone calls from neighbors and waiting for word about Marcus. The federal agents had taken him to the county hospital first, then to some undisclosed location for questioning. Sheriff Collins had been politely evasive about the details. On Thursday morning, she was surprised to find Marcus sitting on her front porch, his leg in a proper cast and his face showing the strain of whatever conversations he'd had with the FBI. They let you go? Temporarily. I'm what they call a cooperating witness now. House arrest, basically, until the trial. He gestured to an electronic monitor around his ankle. They figured your place was as good as any for keeping me out of trouble. Sarah helped him inside, noticing how carefully he moved. Are you all right? Beyond the obvious. Depends on your definition of all right. Marcus settled into her father's old recliner with visible relief. I told them everything, Sarah, about the club, about things I've seen and done. Some of it wasn't pretty. She brought him coffee and her mother's old recipe book, its pages yellowed with age and stained with decades of use. My mother always said the best healing happened in the kitchen. Maybe some of her remedies might help with the pain. Marcus accepted the book gratefully, running his fingers over the handwritten notes in the margins. Willow bark tea for inflammation, honey and ginger for nausea. My grandmother used to make things like this. Your grandmother was a healer, in a way. She raised me after my parents died. Car accident, same as Emma. Marcus's voice carried the weight of too much loss. She always said the plant world had answers if you knew how to listen. Sarah settled across from him with her own coffee. Is that why you joined the club? After losing so much? Marcus was quiet for a long time, studying the recipe for chamomile and lavender salve. After Emma died, I couldn't stand being around normal people living normal lives. The club was full of broken men like me. Seemed like where I belonged. And now? Now I'm not sure where I belong. He looked up from the book. The agents want me to testify against men I've called brothers for 3 years. Some of them deserve it, but others. It's complicated. Sarah had been wrestling with her own complications. The town's reaction to her harboring Marcus had been swift and unforgiving. 2 customers had cancelled their orders for her handmade quilts. The pastor had called to suggest she might want to reconsider her associations before Sunday service. Even her closest friend Janet had been cool during their last conversation. I've been thinking about my husband, Sarah said suddenly. David used to say that doing the right thing rarely felt good at the time, that it was usually messy and complicated and made people angry. Marcus set down the recipe book. What did he do? Your husband? Military intelligence? Army? He died in Afghanistan, but not in combat. He was investigating corruption in the supply chain. Someone was selling weapons to insurgents. Sarah's voice grew quiet. His commanding officer said David could have looked the other way, kept himself safe. But that wasn't who he was. Sounds like a good man. He was. And he would have done exactly what you're doing now, even knowing the cost. Marcus reached across the space between them and touched her hand. What cost are you paying for helping me? Sarah didn't pull away from the contact. His hands were scarred and calloused, marked by years of hard work and harder choices. But they were gentle and warm, and the first human touch she'd allowed herself in. Months. The town thinks I've lost my mind. Mrs. Garrett at the grocery store actually asked if I was having some kind of breakdown. Sarah managed a rueful smile. Maybe they're not entirely wrong. And what do you think? Sarah considered the question seriously. I think I've been sleepwalking for 5 years, going through the motions of living without actually being alive. Helping you. It's the first time in years I felt like I was doing something that mattered. Marcus turned his hand palm up, letting her choose whether to maintain the contact. After a moment's hesitation, Sarah interlaced their fingers. Agent Morrison said the trial could take months. There are multiple defendants, complex charges. I'll be here for a while. Good, Sarah said, surprising herself with the firmness of her response. I mean, if you want to be. If you don't mind staying with someone the whole town thinks has lost her mind. Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be. 2 weeks into Marcus's stay, Sarah found him sitting on the back porch at dawn, staring at something in his hands. As she approached with 2 cups of coffee, she realized he was holding a child's drawing, carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve. Emma made this the week before she died, Marcus said without looking up. It was supposed to be a Father's Day present, but she couldn't wait. She was like that, always too excited to keep secrets. Sarah sat beside him on the porch swing her grandfather had built 60 years ago. The drawing showed a motorcycle with 2 stick figures riding it, both wearing enormous smiles. Above them, Emma had written, "Me and Daddy," in uneven purple crayon. She wanted to ride with me when she turned 8, Marcus continued, his voice thick with memory. I kept telling her maybe when she was older. Always, maybe later, maybe next year. I was so worried about keeping her safe that I forgot to let her live. Sarah studied the drawing, noting how the little girl had drawn herself with arms spread wide, as if embracing the wind. She looks fearless. She was. More fearless than I ever was. Marcus carefully returned the drawing to his wallet. I used to wake up in the middle of the night sometimes, just to check on her, make sure she was still breathing. My biggest fear was something happening to her. And then it did, and then it did. Marcus accepted the coffee Sarah offered. But not because I wasn't careful enough. Because some drunk decided his convenience was more important than a little girl's life. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Sarah found herself thinking about the children she and David had planned to have. The conversations that had been cut short by deployment schedules and then by death. Do you think she would have liked the motorcycle? Sarah asked. Marcus's face softened. She would have loved it. Emma wasn't afraid of anything. Spiders, heights, the dark. She used to tell me that being scared was just your imagination being too loud. Smart girl. Too smart for her own good sometimes. Marcus smiled at some private memory. She once asked me why motorcycles were so loud. When I told her it was so cars could hear us coming, she said we should just put bells on them instead. Like ice cream trucks. Sarah laughed despite herself. I would have liked to meet her. She would have liked you too. Emma had a thing for fixing broken things. Birds with hurt wings, stray cats, that sort of thing. She would have seen something in you that needed healing. The comment caught Sarah off guard. What makes you think I need healing? Marcus turned to look at her directly. Because I recognize the signs. You've got the same look I had for the first year after Emma died. Like you're waiting for permission to start living again. Before Sarah could respond, the sound of motorcycle engines rumbled in the distance, growing steadily louder. Marcus tensed immediately, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Expecting company? Sarah asked, though she could see from his expression that he wasn't. 3 motorcycles turned into her driveway, their riders wearing the familiar leather vests of the Hells Angels. Marcus stood slowly, favoring his injured leg, and Sarah could see the conflict playing across his features. Brothers, he said quietly, but there was uncertainty in his voice. The lead rider removed his helmet. revealing a weathered face marked by years of hard living. He was older than Marcus, with grey threading through his black beard, and scars that spoke of violence survived. "Road Captain," the man called out, using Marcus's club title. "Been looking for you." "Hammer," Marcus replied, moving protectively in front of Sarah. "What brings you all the way out here?" The man called Hammer looked around the property with obvious disdain. "Heard you been having conversations with people you shouldn't be talking to. Federal agents have a way of being persuasive. Is that what we're calling it now?" Hammer's eyes shifted to Sarah, and she felt a chill run down her spine. "And who might this be?" "She's nobody. Just someone who helped me when I was hurt." "Nobody, huh?" Hammer smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Funny thing about nobodies. They sometimes end up knowing things they shouldn't know. Sarah realized with growing alarm that this wasn't a social visit. These men had come here with a purpose, and that purpose involved making sure Marcus's cooperation with the FBI went no further. Marcus seemed to reach the same conclusion. "You need to leave now." "I don't think so, Road Captain. We need to have ourselves a conversation about loyalty, about what happens to brothers who forget where they come from." The community center hadn't seen this many people since the Christmas pageant. Sarah sat in the back row, watching as nearly half the town filed in for what Pastor Williams had diplomatically called a community safety discussion. The real purpose was written on every worried face. What to do about the dangerous biker living in their midst? Sheriff Collins stood at the front of the room, his badge catching the fluorescent lights as he tried to maintain order. The silver star had been polished to a bright shine, as if he'd wanted to remind everyone of his authority before this meeting began. "Folks, let's keep this civil," Collins said, raising his voice over the murmur of concerned conversations. "We're here to discuss the situation with Mr. Torres and address everyone's concerns." Deputy Warren sat in the front row, his arms crossed and his expression grim. Sarah had never liked Warren much. He had a reputation for being heavy-handed with traffic stops, and had always seemed to enjoy the power that came with his position a little too much. "Sheriff, with respect, what's to discuss?" Warren spoke up before Collins could continue. "We've got a known criminal living in our community. Hells Angels aren't exactly known for their charitable work." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Sarah recognized most of the faces. These were people she'd known her entire life, people who'd brought casseroles when David died and helped her with harvest when she couldn't manage alone. But looking at them now, she saw fear and prejudice where she'd once seen neighbors. "Mr. Torres is cooperating with a federal investigation," Collins replied carefully. "He's under court supervision and isn't free to leave the area. That's supposed to make us feel better." Janet Morrison, Sarah's former best friend, stood up from her seat 3 rows ahead. "We're supposed to just accept that a drug dealer is living among our children?" Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "He's not a drug dealer." The room fell silent as every head turned toward her. Sarah had spoken more loudly than she'd intended, and now she found herself the center of unwanted attention. "Sarah, dear," Pastor Williams said gently, "perhaps you'd like to share your perspective with the group." Sarah stood slowly, her legs feeling unsteady. "You're all talking about Marcus like he's some kind of monster. Has anyone actually met him? Talked to him?" "We don't need to talk to him," Deputy Warren interjected. "His jacket tells us everything we need to know." "His jacket?" Sarah's voice grew stronger. "You're all ready to condemn a man based on what he wears? What happened to judging people by their actions?" "His actions include associating with known criminals," Warren shot back. "That's good enough for me." Sarah looked around the room at faces she'd known since childhood. 3 weeks ago, Marcus Torres was dying under a tree in my yard. I could have left him there. Would that have made you all feel safer? If I'd just walked away and let him die? The room was uncomfortably quiet now. Sarah could see some people shifting in their seats, unwilling to meet her eyes. "He lost his 7-year-old daughter," Sarah continued, her voice carrying clearly through the silence. "He made some bad choices after that, choices he's trying to make right now by helping the FBI. But apparently that's not good enough for this community. Apparently we're only interested in forgiveness when it's convenient." Mrs. Henderson stood up from her seat near the front. "Sarah's right to help someone in need. That's what we're supposed to do as Christians. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be concerned about our safety. What exactly are you afraid he's going to do? Sarah asked. His leg is broken. He can't leave the county. He's being monitored by federal agents. What terrible crime do you think he's planning? Deputy Warren's face flushed red. You don't know what these people are capable of. I've seen the reports. The violence, the drug trafficking, the intimidation. You're naive if you think one sob story about a dead kid changes what he is. Something in Warren's tone made Sarah pause. There was a personal edge to his hostility that went beyond professional concern. You seem to know a lot about motorcycle clubs, Deputy, she said carefully. Warren's jaw tightened. It's my job to know about criminal organizations. Is it also your job to prejudge people before they've committed any crimes in our community? Sheriff Collins stepped between them before Warren could respond. All right, that's enough. We're not here to attack each other. But Sarah had seen something in Warren's eyes when she'd challenged him, something that made her wonder if his opposition to Marcus was entirely professional. As the meeting dissolved into smaller arguments, she made a mental note to ask Marcus what he knew about Deputy Warren's apparent expertise in motorcycle club activities. The rumble of engines announced their arrival before Sarah could see them. Through the kitchen window, 3 motorcycles appeared at the end of her driveway, their riders dismounting with the casual confidence of men accustomed to intimidating others. Marcus moved to the window, his face grim as he recognized the lead rider. Hammer's back, he said quietly. And he brought reinforcements. Sarah joined him at the window, studying the men gathered near their bikes. Each wore the distinctive Hell's Angels insignia, the winged death's head patch that had become synonymous with organized crime in the public imagination. But it was the smaller patches below the main insignia that seemed to capture Marcus's attention. What do those other patches mean? Sarah asked. Chapter insignia, territory markers. That one. Marcus pointed to a diamond-shaped patch on Hammer's vest. That means he's been authorized to speak for the club leadership. The 3 men approached the house with deliberate slowness, their boots crunching on the gravel driveway. Hammer knocked on the front door with the same authority he'd shown during his previous visit, but this time there was an underlying tension that made Sarah's skin crawl. Marcus opened the door before Sarah could object, squaring his shoulders despite his injured leg. "Hammer boys," road captain. Hammer's greeting was formal, almost ritualistic. "We need to talk. Club business. I'm not club anymore. You know that. See, that's where you're wrong." Hammer stepped closer, forcing Marcus to either retreat or stand his ground. Marcus held his position. "Nobody leaves the club, Marcus. You know the rules." Sarah moved to stand beside Marcus, her presence a silent declaration of solidarity. Hammer's eyes shifted to her with undisguised contempt. "Ma'am, this is private business. Maybe you should find somewhere else to be for a while." "This is my property," Sarah replied evenly. "I'll be wherever I choose to be." One of the other riders, a younger man with a skull tattoo covering half his face, laughed harshly. "Got yourself a guard dog, Marcus? That's sweet." Marcus's hand moved to Sarah's arm, a warning to stay calm. "What do you want, Hammer?" "What I want is for you to remember where your loyalties lie. You took an oath, brother. Blood in, blood out. That oath doesn't become optional just because some federal agents got their hooks in you." "My daughter's dead because of club business," Marcus said, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "Because I chose a meeting over picking her up from school. Don't talk to me about loyalty." Hammer's expression softened slightly, but his stance remained aggressive. "Emma's death was a tragedy, but it wasn't the club's fault, and you know it, wasn't it?" Marcus challenged. "How many meetings, how many runs, how many times did I put the club before my family? The club doesn't just want your loyalty, Hammer. It wants your soul." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sheriff Collins's patrol car, followed by a black sedan that screamed, "Federal agents." Agent Morrison emerged from the sedan as Collins approached the group of motorcycles. "Gentlemen," Morrison called out. "Is there a problem here?" Hammer's demeanor changed instantly, becoming carefully respectful. "No problem, Agent, just visiting an old friend." "Mr. Torres is under federal protection," Morrison replied. "That means any contact with his former associates needs to be cleared through my office." "We're not former associates," the younger rider said belligerently. "We're brothers." Collins stepped between the groups, his hand resting on his service weapon. "I think it's time for you gentlemen to move along. This is private property, and you're not welcome here." Hammer looked directly at Marcus, his message clear despite the presence of law enforcement. "Think about what we discussed, Road Captain. The club takes care of its own, but it also deals with its problems. Don't become a problem." As the three men mounted their motorcycles and prepared to leave, Hammer called out one final warning. "Next time we come calling, we might not be so understanding about interruptions." The engines roared to life, and the small convoy disappeared down the road, leaving behind the acrid smell of exhaust and the weight of unspoken threats. Agent Morrison approached the porch, where Marcus and Sarah still stood. "Mr. Torres, I think we need to discuss enhanced security measures. Your former associates don't seem willing to respect your change in circumstances." Marcus looked down at the Hells Angels patch on his own vest, still hanging in Sarah's closet where he'd left it the day he decided to cooperate. "They're right about one thing. Nobody leaves the club. But sometimes the club leaves you. What does that mean?" Sarah asked. "It means," Marcus said quietly, "that I'm about to find out what happens when Blood Out isn't just a figure of speech." That evening, Sarah found herself standing in her bedroom doorway, staring at the small wooden jewelry box on her dresser. She hadn't opened it in months, but the confrontation with the Hells Angels had stirred up memories she'd been avoiding. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the lid and removed the simple gold band nestled inside. David's wedding ring lay beside hers, both symbols of a life that had ended 5 years ago on a dusty road in Afghanistan. Sarah slipped her ring onto her finger for the first time since the funeral, feeling the familiar weight of promises made and broken by circumstances beyond anyone's control. "I wondered when you'd do that." Sarah turned to find Marcus standing in the hallway, leaning against the doorframe. His expression was understanding, not judgmental. "Do what? Face whatever you've been hiding from." Marcus gestured toward the ring on her finger. "I've been here 3 weeks, and this is the first time I've seen you wear it." Sarah touched the gold band self-consciously. "It hurts too much usually, but not tonight. Tonight I realized I've been afraid of the wrong things." Sarah moved to sit on the edge of her bed, still holding David's ring. "I was so worried about protecting myself from more pain that I forgot how to live." Marcus entered the room carefully, as if crossing a threshold he wasn't sure he was welcome to cross. "Can I ask what happened to him?" "Convoy hit an IED. David wasn't supposed to be on that particular patrol, but he'd gotten intelligence about weapons smuggling and insisted on following up personally." Sarah's voice grew quiet. "His commanding officer said he could have sent someone else. Could have stayed safe at the base, but that wasn't who he was. No, David never asked anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself." Sarah looked up at Marcus. "You remind me of him sometimes. The way you're willing to put yourself at risk to do what's right." Marcus sat on the chair across from her, careful not to crowd her space. "Is that why you helped me? Because I reminded you of your husband?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "At first, maybe, but not anymore. What changed?" "You did. I did. We both changed." Sarah turned David's ring over in her palm, studying the inscription they'd chosen together. "David and I, we had this perfect love story. High school sweethearts, married young, planned to grow old together. When he died, I thought that was it for me, that I'd had my one chance at love and lost it. And now I'm wondering if maybe people get more than one chance. If maybe the heart is bigger than I thought it was." Sarah met his eyes directly. "I'm wondering if it's possible to love 2 different people in 2 completely different ways." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Sarah, I need you to understand something. The life I've lived, the things I've done, I'm not sure I deserve a second chance at anything, let alone love. That's not your choice to make." "What do you mean?" Sarah stood and moved to the window, looking out at the place where the old oak tree had fallen. "Love isn't something you earn or deserve. It's something that happens despite our best efforts to avoid it. Despite our past mistakes and future fears, the club will never stop coming for me," Marcus said quietly. "Even if I testify, even if they go to prison, there will always be others. Brothers who feel I betrayed them. Is that the kind of life you want? Always looking over your shoulder?" Sarah turned back to him, her decision crystallizing with surprising clarity. "Marcus, 5 years ago I thought my life was over. I'd been living like a ghost, going through the motions but not really alive. These past few weeks, helping you, fighting for you, I've felt more like myself than I have since David died." "That doesn't answer my question." "Yes, it does." Sarah moved closer to him, close enough to see the uncertainty in his dark eyes. "I'd rather live one real day with you than 100 safe days alone." Marcus stood slowly, his injured leg forgotten. "Sarah, I know it's complicated. I know it's dangerous. I know the whole town thinks I've lost my mind." Sarah reached for his hand. "But I also know that you make me want to be brave again." For a moment, they stood together in the quiet bedroom, 5 years of grief and 3 years of guilt suspended between them. Then Marcus lifted his free hand to touch her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Are you sure about this?" "I'm sure about you," Sarah whispered. "I'm sure about us." When he kissed her, it was with the tenderness of someone who understood that love was precious and fragile and worth fighting for, no matter what storms might come. Agent Morrison arrived the next morning with a manila folder thick enough to suggest that Marcus's situation had become significantly more complicated. He spread the contents across Sarah's kitchen table with the methodical precision of someone accustomed to delivering bad news. "Mr. Torres, we need to discuss the scope of your cooperation," Morrison began, opening what appeared to be an FBI case file. The documents inside were heavily redacted, but Sarah could make out enough to understand that Marcus was involved in something much larger than a simple motorcycle club investigation. "How much larger?" Marcus asked, studying the papers. 3 states, multiple federal agencies, and a criminal network that extends far beyond the Hells Angels. Morrison pointed to an organizational chart that looked like a spiderweb of connections. "Your club has been facilitating weapons trafficking for a cartel operation based in Mexico." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "Weapons trafficking?" "Mr. Torres wasn't directly involved in the weapons aspect," Morrison assured her quickly. "But his position as road captain means he has knowledge of routes, timing, and personnel that could be crucial to dismantling the entire operation." Marcus pushed the papers away from him. "I told you everything I know about club operations. I was road captain, not intelligence officer. That's the problem." Morrison leaned forward. "Your testimony alone isn't enough to secure convictions. We need more evidence, and we need it from the inside. You want me to go back? Undercover. We want you to help us gather the evidence we need to stop a criminal enterprise that's responsible for putting military-grade weapons into the hands of drug cartels." Sarah looked between the two men, understanding dawning with horrible clarity. "You want him to betray his former brothers a second time?" "Ma'am, these aren't just motorcycle enthusiasts. This organization has been linked to 17 deaths in the past 2 years alone." Morrison's voice carried the weight of professional conviction. "Mr. Torres has a chance to prevent more violence." Marcus stood and walked to the window, his injured leg making him favor his right side. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Wear a wire. Meet with club leadership. Get them talking about the weapons shipments. They'll kill me if they find out. They'll probably kill you anyway, eventually. This way, at least their deaths serve a purpose." Sarah couldn't stay silent any longer. "Their deaths? You're talking about Marcus dying like it's an acceptable outcome." Morrison's expression softened slightly. "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but Mr. Torres entered into this cooperation agreement knowing the risks. The protection we can offer is limited, especially if he refuses to provide the level of assistance we need." "What kind of protection?" Marcus asked without turning from the window. "Witness protection after the trial. New identity, relocation, complete break from your past life." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah understood immediately what Morrison was really offering. Marcus could save his life, but only by giving up everything and everyone he'd come to care about. "And if I refuse?" Morrison began gathering the papers back into the file. "Then you'll testify with the information you've already provided, and we'll hope it's enough. But the club knows you've talked to us, Mr. Torres. Your former brothers have made their position clear. There's no going back to your old life either way. Sarah moved to stand beside Marcus at the window, her hand finding his. How long would he have to decide? The grand jury convenes in 6 weeks. We need his answer by the end of this week. After Morrison left, Sarah and Marcus sat in silence at the kitchen table, the weight of the decision settling between them like a physical presence. The FBI file remained where Morrison had left it, a reminder of the violence and criminality that had brought them together. "You have to do it," Sarah said finally. Marcus looked at her in surprise. "Even if it means losing everything we've found together?" "Especially because of that." Sarah took his hands in both of hers. "Marcus, if 17 people have died because of weapons these men provided, how many more will die if nothing changes? How many other daughters like Emma? You're asking me to choose between justice and love. I'm asking you to choose between running from who you are and becoming who you're meant to be." Sarah's voice grew stronger. "David died trying to stop weapons from reaching the wrong hands. If you can finish what he started, how can I ask you not to?" Marcus pulled her closer, understanding that she was offering to sacrifice their future together for something larger than themselves. "And after? If I survive this? If you survive this, we'll find a way. Love doesn't have to end just because circumstances change. You would wait for me, even if it took years to find each other again." Sarah thought of the wedding ring she'd finally been brave enough to wear again. Some things are worth waiting for. Sarah discovered Deputy Warren's secret by accident, though looking back, she realized the signs had been there all along. She'd gone to the sheriff's office to ask about increased patrols around her property, given the escalating tensions with the Hells Angels. Sheriff Collins was out, but the desk sergeant had waved her toward Warren's office. The door was slightly ajar, and Warren was on the phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. Sarah was about to knock when she heard something that made her blood run cold. "I told you he's under federal protection now. We can't just make him disappear." Warren's voice carried a frustration that suggested this wasn't his first such conversation. "The FBI is watching him too closely." Sarah pressed herself against the wall beside the door, her heart pounding as she listened. "No, I don't know exactly what he's told them, but if he goes undercover, he'll find out about the warehouse operation. Everything we've built will come crashing down." There was a pause, as Warren listened to whoever was on the other end of the line. "I understand the stakes, but killing a federal witness brings heat we can't handle. There has to be another way to handle this." Sarah felt sick. Warren wasn't just corrupt. He was actively working with the very criminals Marcus was trying to help the FBI catch. As quietly as possible, she backed away from the office and slipped out of the building, but her departure hadn't been as silent as she'd hoped. 20 minutes later, as she sat in her truck in the grocery store parking lot, trying to process what she'd heard, Warren's patrol car pulled up beside her. "Sarah," Warren called through his open window. "Fancy meeting you here, Deputy Warren." Sarah tried to keep her voice steady. "Just running errands." Warren got out of his car and approached her driver's side window. Up close, she could see the tension in his face, the way his hand rested casually on his service weapon. "Heard you stopped by the office looking for me. Sorry I missed you. Sheriff Collins wasn't in. I was hoping to discuss security concerns. About your house guest, I imagine." Warren's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Must be difficult harboring a criminal. Never knowing who you can trust." Sarah realized with growing alarm that Warren knew she'd overheard his phone conversation. "I should get going. These groceries won't keep." "Sarah." Warren's hand moved to rest on her door handle, preventing her from closing the window. "You seem nervous. Is everything all right?" Before Sarah could answer, Warren's personal cell phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression changed, becoming predatory. "Interesting. I just got a text from a friend of mine. Seems someone was asking questions about motorcycle club activities in the Tri-County area. Someone who fits your description." Sarah's mouth went dry. "I don't know what you mean." Warren leaned closer to her window. "Here's the thing about small towns, Sarah. Word travels fast. When someone starts poking around in business that doesn't concern them, it tends to get back to the wrong people." "Are you threatening me, Deputy?" "I'm advising you. As a friend." Warren's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Your boyfriend has caused enough trouble already." Don't make things worse by sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Warren's radio crackled to life, dispatching him to a traffic accident on the other side of town. He stepped back from Sarah's truck with obvious reluctance. Drive safely, Sarah. These roads can be dangerous, especially for people who don't pay attention to where they're going. After Warren left, Sarah sat in her truck for another 10 minutes, her hands shaking as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. Warren wasn't just connected to the motorcycle club's criminal activities. He was actively protecting them, and now he knew that she knew. When she finally drove home, Sarah found Marcus on the back porch, working on his laptop. Agent Morrison had provided it so Marcus could review files and prepare for his potential undercover operation. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Marcus observed. Setting the computer aside, Sarah told him everything about Warren's phone conversation and their encounter in the parking lot. As she spoke, Marcus's expression grew increasingly grim. "Warren has a personal file on me," Marcus said when she finished. "Morrison showed it to me yesterday. Detailed information about club activities, routes, even internal disputes. Too detailed for someone who was just doing his job. What are you saying?" "I'm saying Warren isn't just corrupt. He's been feeding information to rival clubs, playing different factions against each other. That phone call you overheard? He was probably talking to the Iron Wolves." "Who are the Iron Wolves?" "The Hells Angels' biggest competition for territory in this region. If Warren has been helping them, then everything I told the FBI about club operations has been compromised." Marcus stood slowly, his face set with determination. "We need to call Morrison now. Why? What's wrong?" Marcus was already reaching for his phone. "Because if Warren knows I'm going undercover, then it's not an investigation anymore. It's a trap." Marcus stared at the burner phone Agent Morrison had given him, its black surface reflecting the kitchen light like a dark mirror. The device represented everything he'd tried to leave behind when he decided to cooperate with the FBI. Yet now it was his only hope of exposing the corruption that threatened to destroy everything he and Sarah had built together. The recording quality isn't great. Morrison had explained during his hurried visit after Sarah's discovery about Warren. But it should be sufficient to capture incriminating conversations. The key is getting Warren to admit his connection to the Iron Wolves. Sarah sat across from him at the kitchen table, studying the phone with obvious distress. "This is insane. You're talking about deliberately provoking a corrupt police officer who's already threatened me." "We need evidence," Marcus replied, though his own doubts were written across his face. "Warren's been playing both sides for months, maybe years. Without proof, it's just our word against his, and if something goes wrong, if he discovers you're recording him..." Marcus pocketed the phone carefully. "Then at least the recording will survive to tell the story." The plan was elegantly simple and terrifyingly dangerous. Marcus would arrange to meet Warren under the pretense of offering information about the FBI's investigation in exchange for protection from the Hells Angels. The conversation would be recorded, hopefully capturing Warren's admission of his criminal connections. "I don't like this," Sarah said for the third time in 10 minutes. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." Marcus reached across the table to take her hand. "Warren knows too much about the investigation. If we don't stop him, people are going to die." "Good people." The phone call to Warren was surprisingly easy to arrange. The corrupt deputy seemed eager to meet, suggesting a location at the old grain elevator on the outskirts of town. It was isolated, private, and far from any federal surveillance. "Tonight at 10, Warren had said. "Come alone and Torres. Don't do anything stupid." As evening approached, Marcus found himself thinking about Emma, about the drawing she'd made of them riding together. She'd wanted to see the world from the back of his motorcycle, fearless and trusting in his ability to keep her safe. He'd failed her then, but maybe he could honor her memory by protecting other children from the weapons trafficking that Warren was facilitating. "I should go with you," Sarah said, as Marcus prepared to leave. "Absolutely not. If things go wrong, I need to know you're safe. If things go wrong, I need to be there to help." Marcus cupped her face in his hands, memorizing her features in case this was the last time he saw her. "Sarah, you've already helped more than you know. You gave me a reason to want to be better than I was. Then don't throw that away by getting yourself killed. The grain elevator loomed against the night sky like a concrete monument to better times. Marcus arrived early, concealing himself behind a stack of rusted equipment where he could observe Warren's approach. The burner phone felt heavy in his jacket pocket, its digital recorder already activated. Warren's patrol car arrived exactly at 10, its headlights sweeping across the abandoned lot before settling on the designated meeting spot. The deputy emerged slowly, one hand resting on his service weapon. "Torres," Warren called out. "I know you're here. Let's get this over with." Marcus stepped into the open, his hands visible and empty. "Deputy Warren, you sounded scared on the phone. FBI not treating you as well as you expected?" "The FBI doesn't know I'm here." Marcus kept his voice steady, professional. "I need insurance. Protection from my former brothers." Warren laughed, a harsh sound in the quiet night. "Protection from me? That's rich. I know you have connections. Influence with people who could make the Hells Angels back off. And what makes you think I'd help you?" Marcus took a careful step closer. "Because we both know the Iron Wolves would pay well for information about federal investigation tactics. Information only someone with inside access could provide." Warren's demeanor shifted, becoming more alert. "That's a serious accusation, Torres." "It's not an accusation. It's a business proposition." Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool night air. "The FBI trusts me. I know their plans, their evidence, their weaknesses. That information has value to the right people. You're talking about betraying federal agents. I'm talking about survival. The Hells Angels want me dead. The FBI will abandon me the moment I'm no longer useful. But the Iron Wolves, they understand loyalty to people who prove their worth." Warren was quiet for a long moment, weighing the offer. When he spoke again, his voice carried the cautious excitement of someone who'd found an unexpected opportunity. "What exactly do you know about Iron Wolves' operations?" Marcus felt his heart rate increase. Warren had just admitted knowledge of the rival club's activities. "The recording was working. I know they've been expanding their territory. I know they need reliable sources inside law enforcement. And I know you've been providing that service for quite some time." The revelation came when Warren's guard finally dropped completely. He'd been boasting about his connections with the Iron Wolves for 10 minutes, unaware that every word was being recorded, when he made a casual comment that changed everything Marcus thought he knew about himself. "You know, Torres, you're not the first Hell's Angel I've had to deal with. I served with plenty of your type in Iraq. Bunch of adrenaline junkies who couldn't adjust to civilian life." Marcus felt something click into place. "You served in Iraq?" 3 tours, military police. Learned a lot about dealing with troublemakers." Warren's voice carried the bitter edge of someone whose service hadn't ended the way he'd hoped. "Of course, the army didn't appreciate my methods. Gave me an early discharge when some Haji complained about my interrogation techniques." "What unit?" "Why do you care?" Marcus reached slowly into his jacket, not for the phone, but for something else entirely. Hidden beneath his shirt, hanging on a chain that he'd worn for 15 years, were his military dog tags. He'd kept them concealed since arriving at Sarah's farm. Another piece of his past that didn't fit the Hells Angels image he'd been projecting. "Because I served too," Marcus said, pulling the tags free. "2nd Airborne. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq." Warren's confidence faltered. "Your military?" "Staff Sergeant Marcus Torres. Received the Bronze Star for valor during the Battle of Fallujah." Marcus let the tags hang visible against his chest. "Medic, actually. Saved a lot of lives over there." "That's impossible. Hell's Angels don't recruit military. They recruit broken men looking for a new brotherhood after losing the one that mattered most." Marcus's voice carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. What they don't tell you is that no brotherhood built on crime can replace the one you lost serving your country." Warren was staring at the dog tags as if they were some kind of trick. "You're lying. Check with the VA if you want. Marcus Antonio Torres, service number on the tags. Purple Heart recipient. Honorable discharge after my convoy got hit by an IED." Marcus took a step closer. "The same IED attack that killed my best friend and left me with chronic pain that the doctors couldn't fix. So you turned to crime. I turned to the easiest available substitute for the brotherhood I'd lost. Same as you turned to corruption when the legitimate system didn't give you what you thought you deserved. Warren's hand moved to his service weapon. You don't know anything about what I deserve. I know you're helping criminals traffic weapons to drug cartels. Military-grade weapons that are being used to kill American soldiers and innocent civilians. Marcus's voice hardened. I know you've forgotten what those dog tags around your neck are supposed to mean. Warren pulled his weapon, though he didn't immediately aim it at Marcus. You're wearing a wire. Does it matter? You've already confessed to enough federal crimes to put you away for life. You sanctimonious bastard. You think wearing those tags makes you better than me. You joined a criminal organization, and I'm trying to make it right. What's your excuse? Warren raised his weapon, pointing it directly at Marcus's chest. My excuse is that I'm tired of being the good guy in a world that doesn't reward good guys. Marcus spread his hands, showing he was unarmed. That's where you're wrong, Warren. The world does reward good guys, just not always in the ways we expect. Save the philosophy for someone who cares, like your daughter. Warren froze. What did you say? You've got a daughter, don't you? I can see her picture on your dashboard from here. Pretty girl, looks like she's about 12. Marcus's voice grew gentle. What do you think she'll say when she finds out her dad was helping criminals get weapons? What do you think she'll say when she visits you in federal prison? Shut up. I had a daughter too, Warren. 7 years old when she died. Every morning I wake up knowing I failed her, knowing I chose other things over being the father she deserved. Marcus touched his dog tags again. But I can still choose to be the man she thought I was. You can make that choice too. Warren's weapon wavered slightly. It's too late. I'm in too deep. It's not too late until you pull that trigger. Right now you're just a corrupt cop. Pull that trigger and you become a cop killer. There's no coming back from that. In the distance, the sound of approaching vehicles cut through the night air. Warren's head snapped toward the sound, and Marcus realized that Agent Morrison had been monitoring the situation more closely than he'd admitted. Your choice, Warren, Marcus said quietly. Die here as a corrupt cop, or live to face the consequences as a man who chose to do the right thing, even if it was too late. The second storm hit just as Warren made his decision. Lightning split the sky as he lowered his weapon, the thunder drowning out the sound of federal vehicles racing toward the grain elevator. But nature's timing couldn't have been worse. The approaching storm meant that everyone in the small town would be trapped together, and the Iron Wolves had been waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity. Sarah heard the emergency radio crackle to life in her kitchen just as the first heavy raindrops began pelting her windows. The device had belonged to her father, a relic from his days as a volunteer firefighter. But tonight, it was her only connection to the chaos unfolding across the county. All units, multiple motorcycle vehicles heading toward residential areas. Severe weather warning in effect. Residents advised to shelter in place. Sarah's blood ran cold. Marcus was still at the grain elevator with Warren, and if armed bikers were moving through town during a storm, it wasn't a coincidence. She tried calling Marcus's cell phone, but the call went straight to voicemail. The storm was already interfering with cell towers. The radio crackled again. Sheriff Collins to dispatch. I've got reports of armed men surrounding the Mitchell property, requesting immediate backup. Sarah's hands shook as she tried to process what she was hearing. They'd come for Marcus, but he wasn't here, which meant they were here for her. A thunderclap shook the house, and in its wake, Sarah heard the unmistakable sound of motorcycle engines in her driveway. Through her kitchen window, she could see headlights cutting through the rain. At least 4 bikes, arranged in a semicircle around her house. The emergency radio provided a constant stream of updates that painted an increasingly dire picture. Fire department reporting downed power lines on County Road 7. Multiple accidents due to poor visibility. Emergency services are severely limited. Sarah realized with growing horror that the storm had given the Iron Wolves perfect cover for their operation. Emergency services were overwhelmed. Communications were spotty, and anyone who might help her was dealing with their own weather-related crises. A heavy knock shook her front door, followed by a voice that cut through the storm noise. Mrs. Mitchell, we know you're in there. We just want to talk. Sarah recognized the voice from Marcus's descriptions. Hammer, the Hells Angels leader who'd visited before. But if Hammer was here during a coordinated attack by the Iron Wolves, something had gone very wrong with everyone's assumptions about who was fighting whom. The radio provided another update. Sheriff's Department reports Deputy Warren has been arrested at the grain elevator, charges pending, so Warren had been taken into custody, which meant Marcus was probably safe. But that left Sarah alone and trapped, with armed men surrounding her property during the worst storm in years. Mrs. Mitchell. Hammer called again. Torres isn't here, is he? That's all right. We've got business with you, too. Sarah grabbed the emergency radio and moved toward the back of the house, hoping to reach her truck in the barn. But as she peered through the rear window, she saw more motorcycles positioned to cut off any escape route. The radio crackled with static, then cleared enough for her to hear Sheriff Collins's voice. Federal agents report that the Iron Wolves and Hells Angels have formed a temporary alliance. Both clubs consider Marcus Torres and anyone helping him to be targets. Sarah felt her world tilt. The two rival clubs had joined forces against Marcus, which meant the danger was far worse than anyone had anticipated. And with the storm providing cover, they could do whatever they wanted without fear of immediate intervention. A new sound cut through the storm noise. Breaking glass. They were coming inside. Sarah ran for her father's old gun cabinet, her hands fumbling with the combination lock as heavy footsteps echoed through her house. The emergency radio continued its stream of updates, each one worse than the last. Multiple reports of gunfire in the residential district. Emergency responders unable to reach affected areas due to storm conditions. The gun cabinet opened just as Sarah heard voices in her living room. Her father's service pistol felt heavy and unfamiliar in her hands, but she knew how to use it. David had insisted she learn after he deployed, and her father had taught her to shoot as a teenager. Sarah! Hammer's voice was closer now, coming from her kitchen. We're not here to hurt you. We just need information about Torres and his federal friends. Sarah knew they were lying. Men didn't surround a house with weapons if they just wanted to talk. And with the storm providing perfect cover for violence, she was completely on her own. Lightning illuminated the house again, and in its brief flash, Sarah saw shadows moving past her bedroom window. They weren't just in the house. They were everywhere. The emergency radio delivered one final devastating update. All units be advised, the grain elevator location is secure, but federal witness Marcus Torres is missing. Last seen heading toward the Mitchell property. Marcus was coming here, straight into a trap, and Sarah was the bait. Sarah's father's service pistol felt both foreign and familiar in her hands as she crouched behind her bedroom door, listening to the intruders move through her house. The weapon had been cleaned and maintained religiously for decades, a habit her father had never broken, even in retirement. Tonight, his discipline might save her life. The pistol bore the scratches and wear marks of a weapon that had seen combat in Vietnam, then spent 40 years as a symbol of protection rather than war. Her father had shown her how to use it when she was 16, explaining that knowledge of weapons was like knowledge of fire, dangerous if misused, but potentially life-saving when properly understood. Sarah. Hammer's voice echoed through the house. We know you're here. Make this easy on yourself. Through her bedroom window, Sarah could see the storm raging with increasing intensity. Lightning illuminated the yard in stark, strobing flashes, revealing motorcycles positioned like cavalry around her property. The men had used the weather to their advantage, knowing that help would be delayed or impossible. Footsteps approached her bedroom, heavy boots on hardwood floors that had witnessed 3 generations of her family's lives. Sarah steadied her breathing the way her father had taught her, finger resting alongside the trigger guard rather than on the trigger itself. Safety, breathing sight picture, she whispered, reciting the mantra her father had drilled into her during their practice sessions at the old quarry. The bedroom door exploded inward as someone kicked it off its hinges. A man Sarah didn't recognize filled the doorway, water dripping from his leather jacket, a pistol in his hand. Behind him, she could see Hammer waiting in the hallway. There you are, the stranger said, his voice carrying the casual menace of someone accustomed to intimidating others. Drop the gun, lady. Nobody needs to get hurt here. You broke into my house during a storm, Sarah replied, keeping her weapon trained on the man's center mass. Someone's already been hurt. We're looking for Torres. Tell us where he is, and we'll leave you alone. He's not here. Hammer appeared beside the first man, his weathered face grim in the dim light. We know he's not here now, but he'll come for you, won't he? When he hears you're in trouble. Sarah realized with cold clarity that she'd been right about their intentions. They weren't here to capture Marcus. They were here to use her as bait, to draw him into a situation where they could eliminate him permanently. You're wrong about Marcus, Sarah said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. He's not the man you think he is. He's a traitor who chose the feds over his brothers. He's a father who lost his daughter and spent 3 years trying to numb the pain. But he's also a veteran who remembered what honor means. The man in the doorway took a step forward, and Sarah shifted her aim slightly. Her father's pistol felt solid and reassuring, its weight a reminder of all the times he'd protected their family through strength and determination. You know what your problem is, Hammer said conversationally. You think Torres is some kind of hero. But heroes don't join criminal organizations. Heroes don't betray their sworn brothers. Heroes make mistakes and then try to make them right, Sarah replied. Which is more than I can say for men who threaten women to get what they want. Lightning flashed again, and in its brief illumination, Sarah saw movement outside her window. More figures approaching the house, but these moved with different purpose. Law enforcement or federal agents, she hoped. The radio in the kitchen squawked with static-filled voices, and Hammer turned toward the sound. In that moment of distraction, the man in her doorway made his move, lunging forward to grab her weapon. Sarah's training took over without conscious thought. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. If you're going to point a weapon at someone, you'd better be prepared to use it. And if you're going to use it, don't hesitate. The pistol roared in the confined space, its muzzle flash blinding in the darkness. The man stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder, his own weapon clattering to the floor. Federal agents, a voice shouted from outside. Surrender your weapons! Hammer's expression shifted from confident to desperate. This isn't over! He snarled at Sarah, then disappeared down the hallway as the sound of splintering wood came from multiple directions. Sarah remained in position, her father's pistol still ready, until she heard a familiar voice calling her name. Marcus appeared in her doorway, flanked by federal agents, his face a mixture of relief and admiration. Are you hurt? He asked, kneeling beside her. I'm all right, Sarah said, carefully engaging the pistol's safety. But I think I finally understand why my father kept this old gun all these years. Marcus helped her to her feet, his embrace fierce and grateful. What do you mean? Sarah looked down at the weapon that had protected 3 generations of her family. Some things are worth fighting for. 6 months after the storm that had brought them together, Marcus found himself sitting across from Agent Morrison in a sterile federal building, signing the final documents that would officially end his cooperation with the FBI. The federal witness protection papers felt heavier than they should have, each page representing a choice between safety and the life he'd built with Sarah. The offer still stands, Morrison said, sliding the completed documents into a manila folder. New identity, relocation to a secure area, financial support while you establish a new life. It's the safest option, Mr. Torres. Marcus stared at the papers, knowing they represented a future where he would never again have to look over his shoulder for enemies from his past. The Witness Protection Program had an excellent track record of keeping people safe, but safety came with a price. He would have to disappear completely from the life he'd found in Sarah's small town. What about the trial results? Marcus asked. 17 convictions across both motorcycle clubs. The weapons trafficking network has been completely dismantled. Deputy Warren received 12 years for corruption and conspiracy charges. Morrison's voice carried the satisfaction of someone whose investigation had succeeded beyond expectations. Your testimony was crucial to securing those convictions, and the threats. Neutralized for the most part. The leadership of both clubs is in federal prison. But there are always younger members looking to make names for themselves, and you'll always be the man who brought down their organizations. Marcus understood the subtext. He could live safely, but only if he was willing to abandon everything that had given his life meaning again. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd found redemption by helping the FBI, but that redemption required sacrificing the relationship that had made him want to be redeemed in the first place. I need time to think. Of course, but Mr. Torres, I hope you understand that this opportunity won't remain available indefinitely. The longer you remain in your current location, the greater the risk becomes. Marcus left the federal building and drove back toward the small town he'd come to think of as home, his mind wrestling with the impossible choice. As he passed the spot where the old oak tree had fallen, he saw that Sarah had planted a new sapling in the exact same location. The young tree was barely 3 feet tall, but it stood straight and strong, its roots already beginning to establish themselves in the familiar soil. He found Sarah in her workshop behind the house, working on a quilt that depicted the town's main street in intricate detail. Each building was rendered in careful stitches, from the church where Pastor Williams had eventually welcomed Marcus, despite the community's initial resistance, to the diner where Mrs. Henderson had grudgingly admitted that maybe she'd been wrong about him. "How did it go?" Sarah asked, without looking up from her work. Marcus sat on the stool beside her workbench, watching as she added tiny French knots to represent the leaves on the trees lining Main Street. "They want me to disappear. I figured they would. New name, new life, new everything. Complete break from the past." Sarah's hands stilled on the fabric. "Including me, including you." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of federal bureaucracy pressing down on the fragile happiness they'd built together. Outside, Marcus could hear the normal sounds of small-town life, children playing in a neighbor's yard, a lawnmower running somewhere down the street, the distant whistle of the freight train that passed through twice daily. "There's something I need to tell you," Sarah said finally, setting down her needle. "I've been offered a job, teaching position at the state university, art therapy for veterans dealing with trauma." Marcus felt his heart sink. "That's in the capital, 300 miles away. 287, actually. I looked it up. Sarah. I haven't accepted it yet. I wanted to talk to you first." Sarah finally looked up from her quilting. "But Marcus, it's exactly the kind of work I've always wanted to do. Helping people heal through creativity, working with veterans who understand what loss looks like. You should take it." "Should I?" Marcus reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers the way he'd done dozens of times over the past months. "You helped me remember that redemption doesn't mean forgetting the past. It means choosing a different future." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe the federal witness protection program isn't the only way to start over. Maybe sometimes you can start over by moving forward instead of running away." Sarah's eyes brightened with understanding. "The job comes with married housing if I have a spouse. Is that a proposal, Ms. Mitchell?" "It's a possibility, Mr. Torres, if you're interested in becoming someone who doesn't need to hide from his past because he's too busy building his future." Marcus looked at the witness protection documents in his jacket pocket, then at the woman who'd taught him that love was worth fighting for. The choice, when it came down to it, wasn't difficult at all. The new oak sapling stood barely 4 feet tall in the spring sunshine, its tender leaves unfurling with the promise of decades of growth ahead. Sarah knelt beside it, carefully patting soil around its base, while Marcus steadied the slender trunk against the gentle breeze that carried the scent of apple blossoms from the neighbor's orchard. "Your grandfather would have approved," Marcus said, watching Sarah's careful ministrations, planting hope in the same spot where the old tree fell. "He always said, 'That's what farmers do,'" Sarah replied, brushing dirt from her hands. "We plant things and trust that time will make them grow." 6 months had passed since Marcus had torn up the witness protection documents and chosen a different kind of safety. The security that came from building something real instead of running from something broken. Sarah's teaching position at the university had provided them both with a fresh start, and Marcus had found work as a counselor at the Veterans Center. using his own experiences with trauma and poor choices to help other former soldiers find their way back to purpose. The Hell's Angels jacket that had once defined his identity now hung in Sarah's closet beside her wedding dress, both artifacts of chapters that had shaped them, but no longer controlled their futures. Some mornings, Marcus would catch sight of the leather vest and remember the man who had worn it, feeling gratitude for the journey that had led him away from that darkness. "The town's been quiet since we left," Sarah observed, settling beside the sapling they'd just planted. "Mrs. Henderson writes that the new sheriff is working out well, no more corruption scandals. And the community? Healing, according to her letters. People learned something about judging others during all that business with Warren and the motorcycle clubs. Not everyone liked the lesson, but most folks seem to have taken it to heart." Marcus smiled, thinking of the elderly woman who'd initially been so suspicious of him. Mrs. Henderson had surprised everyone by becoming one of his strongest defenders after the truth about Deputy Warren's corruption had emerged. She'd even attended their small wedding ceremony at the courthouse, bringing a cake she'd baked herself, and declaring that love was love, regardless of how unconventional it might appear to others. "Speaking of learning lessons," Marcus said, reaching into his jacket pocket, "I have something for you." Sarah accepted the small wrapped package with curiosity. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a simple wooden box carved with intricate details that depicted a motorcycle and a farmhouse connected by winding roads. "Marcus, it's beautiful. Did you make this?" "Woodworking class at the Veterans Center. Turns out I have steady hands for detail work." Marcus pointed to tiny figures carved into the scene. "That's you on the porch, and that's me arriving that first day. And this," he indicated a smaller figure holding the hand of a larger one, "is Emma, watching over both of us." Sarah opened the box to find a pair of simple gold wedding bands nestled inside. "I thought we were already married." "We are. But those were temporary rings from the courthouse gift shop. These are the real thing." Marcus took her hand. "I wanted Emma to be part of this moment, even if she can't be here in person." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she studied the carved scene. In it, Marcus had captured not just their beginning, but their journey from strangers to partners, from broken individuals to people who'd found healing in helping each other heal. "She would have loved you," Marcus said softly. "Emma always believed that good people found each other eventually." "How can you be sure?" "Because she drew pictures of it. Happy families, people helping each other, love winning over fear." Marcus slipped the new ring onto Sarah's finger. "She was 7 years old, and she understood something it took me 40 years to figure out." Sarah returned the gesture, sliding Marcus's ring into place. "What's that?" "That redemption isn't something you achieve alone. It's something you build, with people who see the best in you, even when you can't see it yourself." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the young oak tree sway gently in the afternoon breeze. Around them, the university town bustled with the energy of students and faculty preparing for the end of another academic year. But here, in their small corner of rented earth, time moved at a different pace. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked. "Giving up the protection program for this?" Marcus considered the question seriously, then shook his head. "I spent 3 years running from who I was. I'd rather spend the next 30 years becoming who I'm supposed to be." The oak sapling rustled its young leaves, and for a moment both Sarah and Marcus could swear they heard the sound of a child's laughter carried on the wind, blessing their new beginning with the memory of love that never truly ends.